Greetings, my excellent friend.
Welcome to Most Excellent Adventure
To Heavy Metal History.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Heavy Metal History Podcast, my guest for this week is guitar player of the band Car Bomb, Greg Kubacki. Greg, thank you for doing the podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. How you doing?
Good. So the thing I like to kind of start off with here, it is a bit of a cliche question, but it does kind of run into what we're going to talk about here. I like to know what bands and records got you into heavy metal and what really made you want to play the genre of music.
Sure. So the first record that got me into it was actually Poison's, what was it? The second one they put out, the one with the big giant orange tongue.
Hell yeah.
I forgot what it's called, but I think it was like maybe 8 or something when I first heard that. And I was like, I want to play like CC DeVille or some shit. And then I heard Master of Puppets, and that completely changed my life. Like I immediately got a guitar, or I begged my parents to get a guitar right after that. And then after that, the really next big record was like the Meshuggah stuff, like Destroy, Erase, Improve.
Yeah.
Mr. Bungle, the second record they put out, Cisco Volante, is amazing. And, I grew up listening to like Megadeth and Testament and all that stuff. But now I don't really listen to too much metal.
Mm-hmm.
Like I either listen to like really extreme metal or I listen to something else. Like I like bands like Ulcerate and like more stuff on the hardcore tip, like Employed to Serve. Like I love Deftones. I still love like new metal stuff, like Korn and stuff like that. So it kind of ranges all over the place.
Nice. Yeah, that's one common theme that I appreciate about a lot of metal guys is, they aren't just stuck on the genre itself. We all kind of like branch out into other things because it just gets so overwhelming listening to metal constantly. I would be surprised if any metal dude can actually do that.
There's some out there for sure.
True. So, it's funny too, because you mentioned Poison kind of being like your initial step into, getting into heavy metal. And like, I think one thing, and maybe you'll agree with me on this, but a lot of those guitar players, even though it was like hair metal or whatever, man, they could shred so good on a guitar. And like, I think that gets overlooked quite a bit just because of the way they look half the time.
Sure. But I think it's like one of the reasons why they kind of fell as well, because it got too shreddy. Like, like White Snake was hiring like Steve Vai to play all these solos yeah. And just got into like Guitar Wars once like all the shredders came out. It's totally different now because I think like the shredders in contemporary music are going in different directions, and there's so many different things that are influencing them and doing all this crazy stuff. But back in the day, it was sort of like, who could shred the hardest with like the most like blazed out, like loud amp and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I think it was like one of those things that went away in like the mid 90s, and then, probably around like 2008, it started picking up again. And now like there's all these crazy like virtuoso guitar players all over the place.
Dude, it's nuts. Like every time I'm on Instagram, I'm like, Jesus, like I should just quit right now because there's so many people that are so much more proficient at guitar,
Well, so you mentioned yourself playing guitar when you were pretty young. I mean, did you mostly do self-taught kind of stuff, or were you taking lessons around that time?
I took lessons from one dude. I forgot his name, but it was when I was really young. And then after that, it was all self-taught.
Nice.
And we actually, like Mike actually has way more training than any of us, I think. Like Mike actually went to college for classical guitar for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, he was really, really good at that type of stuff. And he knows a lot more theory than everybody and all this other stuff. And we were really kind of scared, especially, speaking for myself in the beginning,
mm-hmm.
trying to learn theory because I really wanted to just explore sounds and riffs and stuff like that. Like one of the things that got me really into writing was listening to like Aphex Twin and Mr. Bungle and more stuff on the experimental tip.
Mm-hmm.
And that was more about noise and not necessarily about like chord changes or, sweeping techniques or whatever. So that was sort of where my ear turned to. And that's when I started diving into effects pretty early as well.
It's, it's interesting you bring up those influences because I think with Mordial, you can really hear a lot more of those like kind of soundscape aspects put onto this record and like experimentation or whatever you want to call it, inputting it into the music. Was that something you felt needed to be more apparent this time around?
It's something I've always wanted to do. I mean, I'm pretty clumsy when it comes to trying to program effects and all that stuff. And once I stumbled upon this little trick of like merging the computer with the Axe effects, like I discovered that I could like sort of change effects quicker, I guess. So that really was sort of the seed of this new material. It was more try to like, how do I get as many different sounds in one song as possible? It's like, how do I switch between, like in Dissect Yourself, there's this like really low, it almost seems like the string is downtuned to slack, like a botch song or something.
Yeah.
And then it switches from that to the everybody calls it the pew 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 sound or whatever. So between switching those two, that all of a sudden it was like, wow, I could sort of do what Aphex Twin does, which is sort of just like injects these weird sort of like hit you over in the head sounds.
Yeah.
And then from there, I mean, I can't really play guitar very well, so it's also like that aspect of it where I just try to hide my improficiency as a technician, as a guitar player, with these crazy effects where I'm just moving my foot.
Yeah, man. So, okay, I'm glad you brought up Dissect Yourself, because that is a song, no pun intended, I really wanted to kind of dissect because of that little laser shooting guitar sound in there.
Sure, okay.
I really want to know how you achieve that, because it's kind of in different songs too, that effect with that laser kind of sound. I mean, how did you experiment around with the guitar and trying to just go towards that sound?
Well, I won't give you the specifics, but I'll say that it's usually different every time. So, so it usually involves a pitch shifter or a ring modulator. I have a bunch of different things I use. Right now, mainly I'm just using the Axe effects.
Okay.
So there's a way you can actually kind of hack it in a way to sort of do things on its own if you confuse it enough. So, yeah, I'm trying to think of it more as also like a way that a synthesizer would use an instrument as opposed to a guitar.
Interesting.
And what's really cool about the Axe effects too is like it has this software that you can edit the patches on your computer as opposed to doing it on the unit itself. And it's like anything that you're using with the computer, once you get like sort of like in the zone, or you're kind of just kind of trancing out and just clicking everywhere, you can just edit things really fast and come up with this weird sound you've never heard before just by experimenting.
So it's really more along the lines of like being kind of electronic more than actual guitar playing in there.
I think so, yeah. I mean, there's still the whole math and the the rhythmic seeds that we do and all that stuff. But as far as the soundscaping goes, yeah, it's definitely like I grew up a lot on Aphex Twin, Autechre. I love like Boards of Canada. Like I'm really into stuff that's out of tune. Like there's one song on this new record that it's the first song on the record where it's going in and out of tune every bar. So it sounds like it's just seesawing between these two sort of worlds of harmony, which is pretty interesting. And so just listening to like Selected Ambient Works Volume 2 or Autechre's XI is like one of my favorite records they've ever done, which is actually pretty recent. They're just so full of these awesome, either creepy or dense or just really rich sounds, and that's sort of what influences me to come up with the parts that I come up with.
Yeah, I'm definitely familiar with a couple of those that you mentioned there, so I can sort of hear it, but I think you kind of do such an excellent job of making it your own thing, and plus it's surrounded by all this death metal intertwined with it, so it brings it like to being a whole new beast at that point. But I think from Meta, that I feel like that's when you guys like really figured out your sound, and now this new album is like a refinement and an expansion of that. And I'm really curious as to when you started writing the record, how you guys kind of just started to develop that into where you are now.
Sure. So we saw obviously we saw the reaction from Meta, and we realized that bringing people into our fold really was the best thing we ever did as a band. Like we used to mix everything ourselves and record everything ourselves, and once we got a professional mixer and a professional engineer with us, it really did sort of change the way we sounded. And the songs were a little more crafted, I think a little better on that record. They're a little shorter, they're a little more to the point. And for this record, it's more towards that direction. So we did a tour with Gojira in 2016, And we just watched them play for a month straight and saw how, every piece of the song made sense and everything like sort of had a purpose for it. And that was sort of the genesis for like our compositions, I guess. So instead of just going, okay, let's just do this sort of like a great example of that is the Sentinel, where the Sentinel is just sort of like a stream of consciousness thing where it's just, we have one idea and we just sort of, rip it to shreds and all these different movements, but there's really no song structure to it. It's just sort of like a stream. Whereas these songs, there's some of that, but there's a lot more of like, even Dissect Yourself, it has a verse, it has a chorus, it has a bridge. And that to us, I think, was one of the most important things when coming up with this batch of new material, is sort of making things a little shorter, hit a little harder, but also finding a way to cram in things that we do.
Yeah, I appreciate the length of this record too. It's got a lot more songs on it, so it doesn't feel like it's over so quick compared to the last one. And so you mentioned like the way you guys kind of compose, and I'm really curious about how you guys get together and write stuff. Like, do you start out with like a soundscape, or do you just kind of fuck around with the Axe Effect stuff, or how do you guys get together and kind of start forming a song?
It depends. Usually for this record, or usually for any record, I'll write a bunch of riffs just like as I'm working at home, because I'm a freelance graphic designer and computer programmer. So I'll take a break. I'll whip out the iPhone and just start jamming, or I'll jam downstairs or in my living room and just come up with ideas, or I'll mess around with the Axe Effects or whatever. Or Elliot will come up with some drum idea, and we'll be practicing, and I'll grab a snippet of it on my iPhone, and then we'll build this bank of all these ideas that we've accumulated. And usually like 3 months down the road, we'll revisit them again and see if there's anything there. And then anything that kind of catches our attention, we'll use as either like the seed of a song, or sometimes there's like, half a song complete, or we will, find stuff that kind of works together or contrasts in a way, and we'll start piecing a song together. And then from there, we'll take the batch of songs and try to find ones that sound different from each other as opposed to ones that sound the same.
Interesting. So it's kind of like a little puzzle that you guys put together over time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's rare that a song comes out in one shot. It has happened. Like Finish It off of W Click W was like that. From the Dust was actually pretty quick too. And I think there's one or two songs. Like I think Hilo was pretty quick too. Hilo was like a couple of days of just a couple of quick ideas, and it just came out. But yeah, usually it's sort of we take like a bird's eye view of the material and try to, like, we know the material that we have, and then we're sort of just arranging it, like you said, like in a puzzle to kind of get impact and the most, I don't want to say the word storytelling, but that's what I mean. Because Gojira does that really well. Like they like take you along for their ride. You know what I mean? Like they bring the energy down and then bring it back up. It's not just like a bunch of, random heaviness. It actually has like this like calculated intent to it, and we tried to copy that on this one.
Okay, so with that in mind, when you're sitting there trying to craft a song and you're experimenting with the different parts, do you like map things out, or is it just kind of like everybody throwing in ideas here and there to kind of like piece it together?
Well, usually the seed, like we have like a thing called a rhythmic seed in our songs. And this might not 100% answer your question, so if I get off tangent, just let me know.
No, you're good.
Okay, man. Cool. So we try to have like this sort of overall arching theme in a song, or a handful of them. And then once we have, like, we like something that we like, either it's a rhythmic idea or something, we try to like refit that into different ideas as much as possible. So we'll try like slowing it down, speeding it up, try different like rhythmic divisions over it, try it in different keys, try different sounds over it, try taking, notes out of the riff and seeing if that happens. And then from there, it's like, once we learn the seed, you can kind of modify it as you go. And so like, it's really hard to learn like that first initial part. But once you get it, you can start messing with it, and it's easier to do it that way. And then that's when parts really start to crank out.
Okay. So yeah, okay, that, you know, that makes sense. That is kind of what I was asking
Okay.
there with like how it comes together. So man, yeah, because I'm really interested because the way you guys kind of like develop these patterns and parts in the song is, you know, it seems very purposeful, you know, with every little thing that you do in the song. Like nothing is just like, hey, here's this heavy part, or hey, here's this really fast part, and then we slow it down. So I've always kind of wondered like what goes into that because it's very like, fuck, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess for lack of a better word, it's very unique. Like the way you guys kind of like pattern everything. You don't really hear that too much. Like it may be in some Meshuggah, but I don't even think that's like a fair comparison because you guys are your own thing. But yeah, I've always been curious about the process of it when you like break stuff down that way or like put it together, and it's interesting to like really hear that how you guys do it.
They actually do it a lot too, though, especially in their newest record. Like songs like "By the Ton," like do it a lot in interesting ways, like where they'll have this like one rhythmic pattern, and then they'll like just throw all these different things over it, but it's still the same pattern, but the riffs sound completely different. And that's something that even for this record, like I heard that song and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I want to see if I can try to copy that, because we were not afraid to like copy our influences, obviously.
Yeah, I guess I'm just like really unfamiliar with that whole aspect of music where it's a lot more like electronic as opposed to like, not that you guys don't actually play instruments, but you know the way it's like written and crafted. So I'm kind of like out of my depth here a little bit. But
well, it's weird. I would recommend, like, the biggest thing that helped, and it might, hopefully it helped this record, you know, hopefully people enjoy it, but like just YouTube videos. I mean, I don't know, like we've met a lot of people from Meta that have been really inspiring, and you know, bands like Bent Knee, you know, talking to Meshuggah, and you know, watching Gojira for a month, and you know, being on the road, sharing a bus with Animals as leaders, and picking their brains on how they write music. And then, you know, these players and these artists and bands, they're so much more proficient and know the terminology on how to make music. So the bits and pieces that sort of like that stand out from anybody that you hear on YouTube or on a podcast, just go down the YouTube rabbit hole and start Google things and just type in terms and see, like, you know, what, I don't know, like a tritone substitution is, or like, you know, how to write different rhythmic patterns, like from a drummer's perspective and stuff like that. And then before you know it, just like you have all this stuff that you can sort of like rip off, to, you know, to put it bluntly. And then from there, as you start mixing it enough, and before you know it, you have your own thing going.
Yeah, I think it's cool though that you're able to like have all these peers at your disposal and really like iron sharpens iron kind of thing, you know, where like I mean, I know you say you want to like rip it off or whatever, but I feel like you do enough to make it your own thing to where like it's not a rip off. And I think taking those like outside opinions kind of is a good thing, you know, especially because would you agree that maybe some bands are like stuck in this little like world of their own where they're not really interested in having outside opinions and they're worried about doing their own thing?
Yeah, I would say that maybe some bands aren't taking enough advantage of the new technology and sort of this connectiveness to everybody. And I understand that too, that a lot of these bands are trying to, you know, they're trying to pay their bills. We're not. Like, we're really like in a weird situation where, you know, none of us are married, none of us have kids. We all can work sort of remotely if we need to. So, and we have, you know, we have the luxury of like, you know, I'm working tonight after this podcast, and, you know, sometimes I can double up and work days and nights. And then there are days where I don't have to work because I'm writing music and stuff. So we're kind of lucky in that respect where we can sort of experiment and see where things are going. Other bands, like, you know, they're trying to make a living in, you know, in an industry that's pretty much dead. So even though they're sort of like maybe not trying to push boundaries so much, they are still like doing a lot of other things, especially with their live shows and all this other stuff, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's something that I think is kind of lost on a lot of people, that, you know, some bands, like you mentioned, that's like their full-time gig. And, you know, I think you guys put out records like what, every 4 years pretty much?
Yeah, we're trying to do every 3 now. We're actually trying to make it quicker, but we always say that and it never happens. So.
But I mean, yeah, you know, I think if you guys are at the point where like you don't really have to rush it and you can kind of take your time to write the music, you're going to be a lot more satisfied with it in the end. Whereas like if you had to put out something every year, you know, how would you cope with that?
Sure.
Having to put out a record every year?
Exactly.
It'd be brutal.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal. I mean, even at the end of this record, like we got into some arguments in the band because we sort of rushed a couple of things at the very end. And there are small details that hopefully nobody will notice, but there's a couple of little areas in there where we're like, maybe that's not the best thing we could have came up with. So, but yeah, we definitely agree with what you're saying as far as like we know not to release anything until it's baked, because you know anything half baked just doesn't taste good.
Yeah, that's a good point. So with this record specifically, you know, after you guys kind of had everything written, did you demo stuff out to have it kind of ready to go before you went to the studio, or was it a case of like everything's written, let's just go straight to recording?
That's kind of how we write. We write with demos. So, you know, usually I'll program the drums and I'll write the riffs and just throw it all in Cubase with, you know, a guitar on each side, have the drum kit from Hell playing, and map it out that way, and then have like a completed song pretty much for everybody to hear. And then you'll get feedback on it, we'll make changes to it, Mike will do his thing to it, and then we'll try to play it and see if it actually feels good. And if it feels good, then we'll make it a song. And then usually the song is written more than rehearsed when we go into the studio. Usually like there's a little bit of a learning process in the studio just to try to get parts. And even some of the guitar stuff that I do, like the riff will evolve even more. Like I'm really settled usually on the rhythmic parts of a song, like you know, what the right hand is doing. But I'm not really, I'm never usually happy with what the left hand's doing. Usually that comes later until I know like what the song is doing. And then once you know Mike has a baseline of what he's doing or a rough sketch, then I'll start adding little accents where he's not singing and try to work stuff that way.
So I want to get your opinion on something, because there does seem to be like this weird divisiveness in the genre right now, especially with like how prevalent technology is of bands not really overproducing a record, but making it sound so pristine to the point where like you can't tell if something is messed up or not played live. You know, they just cut and paste everything so it sounds perfect. Where do you guys kind of fall in that aspect of, you know, overproducing?
Yeah, we
something?
kind of fall in the middle. So it's metal, so like obviously you have to have a trigger for the kick. I'm using an Axe Effects. I'm not using a real amp. This whole record is 100% Axe Effects, and there's some acoustic guitars in there. Johnny is recording direct. We don't record to a click, but we do edit sessions together. So we'll do, you know, we'll record, you know, a section of the song, and then we'll record the next section, but we'll pick the best sections there and then stitch them together. Same thing for guitar, same thing for bass. But we don't move stuff around. So like we're not like drawing in like guitar hits and lining up everything, you know, so that the kick is like just before everything and like making it sound like too polished, because I don't know, you lose a lot of life out of that. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be some sort of looseness to it. And since not playing to a click, like Elliot has the freedom to sort of drag or rush things, or like he'll fudge fills a lot. Like he'll add a couple of notes here and there. And that's sort of where like the magic happens, I guess, for our band, because like I'm very strict with the rhythm and he's not. So like that constant tug of war, like kind of creates something in the middle where it's like, you know, it has like this flow almost like a hardcore band where they, you know, speed up and slow down a little bit, which I think, you know, I didn't mean to cut you off, but having everything locked to the grid and like knowing where like everything is going to go, it just gets so old.
So the thing with the rhythms and the way you guys kind of write them, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, because I'm trying to like figure this out when I listen to it. When you're playing some of those rhythms, do you get to where like the BPMs like slow down along with the rhythm, or is it just the same BPM but you're slowing down the part? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so it depends. On the song. Okay. There are some songs where we are like, you know, intentionally slowing down the BPM and, you know, playing slower. And there's other times where we're just changing divisions and it's perceived that we're slowing down, but we're actually not. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think for Mordial, there's way more of the second case, not the first one.
See, that's the tricky part with me listening to it, is I cannot, for whatever reason, decipher when you guys are doing that. And I'm like, regardless, it sounds, cool as fuck when it happens. But I'm like, damn, man, what are they doing here? Like, because I really try to like dissect everything when I listen to it. So it's really cool to like get that figured out now. Like when you guys kind of like do that in the song.
That's like one of the best things about listening to music from my perspective too, especially like when a new Meshuggah record comes out. And there's still 2 or 3 riffs I don't know on Violent Sleep or Reason as far as how the rhythm goes. And I'm like, I can't wait to the day where I can just be like, yeah, I finally figured it out. But I guess that's sort of what I like as well with music, is discovering new stuff and like figuring out how the hell they made that sound or how they did that rhythm or like all these tricks. And that inspires me to like try to figure out how they're doing stuff.
That was actually something I was going to ask you kind of next is, what do you kind of do or look for to keep yourself inspired as far as writing or, learning guitar, getting better at guitar all the time? Well,
now it's different because now I actually practice. Like I've been practicing for a year. Like I have a metronome on my phone and I have like these exercises. And there's a couple of solos on this. Scattered Sprites has a solo in it. There's another song that has a solo in it. So that's kind of inspiring in a way because now I don't have to, like, I feel like if I have an idea in my head, I can just get it out as opposed to trying to fumble on the fretboard, which I've done a lot in the past. I wasted a lot of time trying to figure out like the chord in my head, but I couldn't figure it out with my hand. And so that's inspiring to me now because now I feel like I can write a little faster. As far as other stuff, it depends. Like, sometimes a movie soundtrack will get me inspired or, seeing another band or hearing a song I really hate, like that'll inspire me because like I'll be like, I could do better than that, and I'll work in the opposite direction. I think the most important thing is just being ready to get the idea down and just get it down. I think if the more you try to keep stuff in your head, the more confusing it gets and the more intimidating it is, and it gets you tired, and it's just not very productive. If you have a phone, just, sing the riff and, into the phone, or pick up a guitar and just get it down, or get a piece of paper and write down the pattern, or try to get it to as completed as an idea as you can, like on a computer or in, just in anywhere. And that way you can, like I said before, you can put it on a shelf and then hear it later and see if you have something.
So it's really just about being extremely proactive and never kind of being sedentary with everything.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think so. Because the more you work, the more stuff comes out and the more surprises happen. I think sometimes you're, just sitting around and an idea pops up and you go, oh, I fixed it. But just showing up too, like that really like moves things along. And I think especially now that we're not, in our teams and we don't have all this time to waste, and we want to write way more music, I'm trying to find way more ways to be productive and keep things rolling.
That's cool though too. You mentioned, being inspired by movie soundtracks, because I've noticed not a lot, but a few guys from like the metal community kind of like starting to go that route too, where they're like doing these ambient soundtracks, or even then you're getting like that synthwave, darkwave stuff kind of working its way into metal now too. And I think those two things go really well. And talking to you about how you kind of write music, it's crazy how much it feels like a natural extension of metal a lot of times. And I'm curious maybe from what your opinion is about why those two things go together so well.
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Well, the technical aspect of it, like as far, if we can go back to Aphex Twin again, is that, his music was really technical at one point where he was doing all this. He was the first person to really do ratcheting, which is when, he would like just, have a knob that would speed up drum hits, and you would just change the speed and it would just create all these like rhythmic, like sort of like Uzi, minigun like impressions with like snare hits and kicks and stuff. And it always sounded awesome. And so, metal has a lot of that. We definitely borrow from that as well, where things are, it's all about the rhythm. It's about like these like complicated patterns that are challenging to play but that are also fun to listen to. And I think our sound guy, Ronnie, he always talks about how, if you are a sound guy in a metal community, like you can pretty much work anywhere, because with metal, like you have to really pay attention to like the frequencies, and especially on the low end, because there's a lot of fighting between the kick and the bass and the low end of the guitar. So you really have to know where everything sits in a mix. And he said, like, that's just like a natural proclivity to that. And I think, a natural extension of mixing is electronic music, because a lot of these artists, like especially Aphex Twin, he'll play things live even when he's recording, and he'll just run the mixer, and he won't do anything in a DAW. He won't like do multi-track recording. He'll just put it all on to 2-inch tape in one shot. And all those performances come from just paying attention and knowing like where, how loud something should be, where the delay should go, where the reverb, how far back the reverb should be, and all that stuff. And I think like just the amount of attention to detail might be the sort of the common link between the two genres.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know a ton about that genre of music. I listen to some of it, but the way you're explaining it is giving me a more of an appreciation for it, because I am kind of one of those asshats that's like, oh, they just press buttons on a computer and play it live, and then they just dance around.
Well, a lot of people do, there is a lot of artists and a lot of music just in general, like today, that where it's literally just formulaic. It's like, oh, you get this sample pack, you get this MIDI pack, you get this EQ preset, and then you just kind of mix them together and you have like a hit. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, especially in the electronic music, that Autechre and all those groups are doing. Like they're really trying to find like the fringes of them and trying to, figure out what new possibilities there are. And I think, a lot of good metal bands today are starting to do that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I'm noticing it pop up more and more, and I think you guys are one of the first bands, besides like, let's say 9 Inch Nails or something like that from back in the day, that like really started to utilize those aspects more in the music. Yeah. And it's always interesting when bands decide to experiment like that and push stuff a little bit further, especially, because metal can be pretty generic sometimes. No offense. Obviously I love it, but sometimes it's like, man, what are you going to do to make this fresh? Yeah.
Right. Well, a lot of people aren't really tuned to that either. Like, I would argue that, a really specialized chef or a really talented chef is not going to be as appealing as like McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like someone who's we specialize in a specific type of music, and it's not for everybody, which is totally fine with us. And so I don't know. I don't think everybody can experiment, 'cause I don't think everybody would listen to it. I think most people do just like they want like a steak. They want like, this regular thing that's just, they know what it is and they're going to enjoy it, which is totally fine. But that's not what I'm into,
Yeah. That's why I kind of asked that question in the beginning of, influences and stuff and how they kind of creep their way in, whether how, small or big or whatever, it's there and hearing about it. And, now when you go listen to the album or albums that you guys have done, I'm sure people can start picking those little elements out and being like, oh shit, now I see that, and have an appreciation for everything that you have an appreciation for too.
I hope so, because a lot of we don't like put Poison riffs in our song, but a lot of the stuff that a lot of the stuff we listen to, like we actually have like a Metallica song on the new record. We have like, not an actual Metallica song, but a Metallica inspired song. And also there's a lot of shoegaze groups and like an early 90s rock that really inspired me, like growing up as well, like My Bloody Valentine and Failure, and the spinoff of Failure, which is Autolux. There's a couple others like Hum. You ever hear the band Hum?
I've heard the name, but I've not listened to them. I don't know, my Spotify might tell me otherwise, because sometimes I'll put on My Bloody Valentine radio and it'll play a bunch of stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, Hum's a little more like on the Nirvana tip. Like Nirvana is actually a big influence too, which might sound kind of cheesy, but the way that Nevermind's a great record, but In Utero and like their early stuff, and even like Incesticide, like they experimented a lot. Like he would just throw he would take a chorus pedal and just like turn all the knobs all the way up and like throw feedback into it, and it just sounded really cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. In Utero is one of those records that no matter how many times I listen to it, there's something weird that I hear on there that's new to me, and I'm like, damn, man, I don't think this album gets enough credit.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it does, and I'm just like not talking to the right
Not
people. But
well, again, it's the same thing. It's like it's not, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like when people think Nirvana, they think of that song. They don't think of like, Buzz Queen or whatever those weird songs are. Like in, like those are the best songs. I love that song. Like I heard Bleach. My friend Courtney was talking about. She was listening to Bleach like a month ago, and I started listening to it, and I was like, man, this is really good. And they recorded it like 3 days for like $800 or something like that.
Isn't Negative Creep like one of the heaviest songs they've ever done too?
That song is awesome. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. I tell people that all the time, and that shit came out in like 89. People fucking don't even think about it. I'm like, you're crazy. Like, go listen to this.
They're playing like also like their riff is like literally just like sliding up and then sliding down, and like that's it. And I was like, that's like Gojira has a riff like that. I always talk to Joe about that. Like my favorite riff is what the hell is the name of the song? It goes and just keeps going. That's the whole riff, and I'm like, that's so like simple and good, like as far as like using the guitar in a different way that most people don't use it,
Yeah, that's something I think is admirable about a lot of guitar players too, that can take, for all intents and purposes, like a simple riff and make it sound like it's way more complicated or way better than just being simplistic, and that takes a lot of talent to do.
Yeah, that's all about the arrangement thing we were talking about, like putting that puzzle piece together, like trying to figure out, like, and they're Gojira are the masters of that, like as far as like, how many times do we play this part to lead up to the next part that like builds up to this other thing that takes you down here. Like they're just, the way that they craft their tunes is like, I don't know, like you said, like just being able to do that's really impressive.
Yeah. So I guess kind of getting back to your album here, when you guys were recording everything, how long do you guys typically take to record stuff? Is it pretty quick in and out, or do you guys have a little bit more leeway where you can take your time to make sure everything is perfect, for lack of a better word there?
We definitely take our time. So Elliot has the worst job because he has to do all of his stuff really quickly. So he had about 2 weeks to record his stuff. We did it. So we prepped for months before that, getting him up to speed with the parts. And then we went to Silver Quarter and worked there for 2 weeks to record the drums. From there, it depends, because like this record took a little longer than usual, but we were all working a lot during that time. So there was never a point where we were just like recording straight. The way we work is that we record our dry signals at home. So like, all our parts are recorded direct, and then we'll reamp with the Axe Effects or other amps later on. And this time around, it was weird. Like the way that the Axe Effects works is you can sort of audition the sound as you're playing it back without actually recording the guitar sound to the disc, which is really flexible now. It's sort of like working with a plugin, like using like the neural DSP, the neural DSP stuff, where you record the dry signal, and then as you play it back, the plugin will play the tone, which is really cool. And there's stuff.
Oh man, I bet that saves so much time.
Dude,
too.
It does. Like I just got some of their stuff. Like Nolly mixed the record, and he has a plugin. And when we were in the UK, he brought me to his studio and showed me the process that he went through to get those sounds. And it sounds really good. Like it's really, really convenient to have those tunes in a plugin. Anyway, so going back to the Axe Effects, so we work that way, and then once the instruments are mostly done, Mike will start adding his stuff, and that takes a little time because he really wants to get his parts right, and like it's all about like our conflicting schedules too, because I live in Long Island and he lives in New Jersey, so we have to like meet up in Brooklyn whenever we're both available. So like we started vocals I think like in February, and we didn't finish until maybe a couple of weeks ago. So it's been like a slow process, but we're not necessarily working the whole time.
That's crazy, man. So like I feel like it's got to be a lot less stress off you guys though, just to be able to work at that pace, because I mean, you did kind of mention that you guys rushed some stuff near the end there, but you know, once it's kind of out there, it's done and you have to accept it. But I mean, do you feel like that those decisions were good in the moment regardless of that?
I think so, yeah. I'm just thinking of like the last record, because I thought the same thing with the last record, and there were a couple of parts on Meta where I'm like, I wish we didn't do that, you know? I'm not going to say what they are.
No, yeah, don't worry about it.
That's probably going to happen in unexpected ways on this one anyway. So it's weird with this type of music, especially when since it's so detail orientated. You have like a tendency to get lost in the details sometimes, and you don't see the bigger picture. We really tried to, see the bigger picture on this one, but I know we still got lost in a little bit of like detail stuff here and there. But
yeah, so was there like a point in time where like you guys were really laboring over something and you did kind of have to take a step back, or have somebody from the outside kind of be like, guys, just let it be, it's going to be fine?
Well, that was sort of my decision at the end. Was towards the end, I'm like, we can work this thing for another 3 months if we wanted to. Let's just, it's as good as it's going to get. Let's get it out. Let's start writing the next one, because they take long enough to write. And
yeah.
But we actually didn't have as much outside help as we'd like to on this one, as far as the material. Like on the last one, Joe from Gojira helped us produce the material as far as vocals and just the overall feel of things. And it was weird not having that this time around, but at the same time, I felt like I learned enough from Meta and from, other artists that we've been talking to and seeing them live, that I think we have like a better hold on like what the material this time around needed to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome to have, man. Cause like, having like, I guess I already mentioned that, but having those peers kind of like help show you what to do has to be such a good feeling, that people actually give a shit about wanting to help out other bands in the scene.
It's crazy, man. We can't thank those people enough that I mentioned before, like, Meshuggah, Gojira, Animals as leaders, Dillinger, Escape Plan, Periphery, Nolly. Like, it just doesn't end. It's like, I guess the more, I hate to sound like, someone who's like championing social media, but like, it really does like make a difference if you're really into something that you like. You know what happens, like when you meet somebody that you're sort of a fan of, you kind of fanboy out a little bit, but then you realize they're fanboying out about the same thing that you're fanboying out, and like there's a lot of common ground to meet there, because these people, like, they're not making billions of dollars off of music. Nobody is. So if you're doing it, you do it because you love it, and it's really exciting to talk to these artists and like figure out like what makes them tick, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't really think I could do stuff that way.
So I'll relay a funny story for you. I used to tour with the band for like 5 years, like working with them, doing merch and all that shit. And anytime, like the first year I did it, anytime we toured the band that I'd like listened to, I had that problem where I was like kind of fanning over them a little bit. And eventually it came to pass, and I was like, wait, this guy likes comic books like I do. Oh, this guy likes horror movies like I do. Like, and you just realize they are normal ass people that like the same things you do, and then it takes all that pressure off, and it wasn't so awkward my second year. But man, I feel like I had so many embarrassing conversations with guys that first year.
Oh my god, we all have, man. Like I got a story. It's horrible, and I hate telling it, but I gotta tell it. So
go for it.
A buddy of mine on Long Island, he plays bass in Helmet. Dave Case. He's one of my best friends. We've been friends for 20 years. And when he got the gig, like over, I think it was like 10 years ago, his first show was this big festival in Ohio, and I just wanted to see it. So I drove, I forgot how far it was. It was like 16, 20 hours or something like that. And I missed the show, but I got to hang out, backstage in like this giant arena. And the backstage area is just like, you know what it's like. It's pretty boring and pretty empty, and it's just, artists walking around. And, this is before I knew what a Punisher was. And I saw Chino Moreno, and I was like, yo, what the fuck? Holy shit. Like yelling at him for like 2 minutes straight. And that was my first impression to him, was fucking screaming at his lungs. And I didn't realize it until years later. I'm like, oh, man, I totally fucking acted like such an asshole in front of that dude, and just was a complete fucking Punisher.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Like when you're not used to being around those people, and it took me, yeah, it took me like a year to get over it. Even still doing this podcast, sometimes when I have on somebody that I haven't met or like, listen to their music, it's hard for me to not be like that Chris Farley sketch. So you remember that time you did that thing and it was so cool?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Man, exactly. But the thing is, like now on the flip side, like we don't get nearly as much as that as Deftones or anything like that. But there are certain parts where I get like the same question sometimes. I'm like, oh, I kind of get it now. Like, everybody's always asking, like, oh, how do you get your guitar sound? Like, what do you do for this? And it's like, oh, I totally get it now. It's so, like, I understand why artists sometimes want to keep their distance a little bit because it does get a little overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, and as much as I try to not ask like cliche questions or stuff like that, sometimes for my own personal curiosity, like I have to just go for it. And I'm like, well, if they get annoyed asking it, that's fine. I'll I'll just move along really quickly. Yeah. But I just have to get that peace of mind.
Yeah.
It's cool though. It's a learning process, especially like doing this all the time because everybody's got like a different demeanor when you talk to them as well. And it's just like, well, I guess we'll see how this goes. And then sometimes it's good, sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's awkward, and you never know which is going to be which.
It also depends like on the person's mood of the day. Like, Joe Rogan always talks about like, people coming up to him, while he's eating dinner. Like, obviously you got to pick like the time to talk to somebody as well. That's really important. Yeah. I think
that's true. That's true. So I guess kind of one final thing here, and I usually stump people with this one, but we'll see how this goes, and if it stumps you, we'll just move on.
All right.
What is something you think people kind of underestimate about your music?
That is a
Yeah, it's a tough
one. Underestimate about our music.
Yeah. It sounds like a shitty question, but it's like, I want you to like see something good that maybe people don't really take into account when listening to your music, if that makes more sense.
I think the lyrics. I don't think people people necessarily like think the lyrics aren't the best they could be, but I'm always amazed at like Mike's lyrics and like all the ways that they relate to each other within the song. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing I'm always like really impressed with Mike. And like, I mean, it's singing obviously. And, we've been friends since high school, so I'm impressed with a lot of things about him. But if I guess I had to answer that, it would be that, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a hard question, man. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
It's cool. I have yet to get anybody to like actually have an answer ready for that one. So I don't always ask it, but and if it doesn't go over well, I just cut it out and go on.
Yeah. Maybe cut that out. Was that the best answer? I don't know.
We'll make it work. Right. We'll make it work.
Awesome.
Cool. So I guess that's kind of it. The record, I guess formalities here. The record comes out the 27th. Yes.
Yeah, we have a listening party this Friday at St. Vitus. And then we have 2 record release shows. September 28th at Euroblast, we're headlining. And then I think the 25th, October 25th in Kingsland.
Oh, sorry. One last thing. The album cover. The two last album covers you guys have done have had this really abstract feel to them. Is that purposeful? Do you guys like want that kind of look for everything? And because I feel it is a very good representation of the music, the way it's just so abstract like that. Like, what do you guys put into coming up with album art?
Again, it's sort of like a fan thing, like where we're just giant fans of like Warp era album covers, like Ortecker's. Like Meta is sort of a ripoff of Ortecker's Untilted, which is this, the silver cover with the blue and the yellow and white shapes on it. It sort of pays homage to that. This one is more generative, so it's more of a homage to like electronic music from that time, where it's not really art that was drawn intentionally. It was sort of made by accident from this program. And we did a couple of iterations of that, and that one we seem to like sort of fit. It ties into Meta in a weird way with that like giant yellow stripe going across. And Yeah, but I don't know. It's just something that we really enjoy, and we're trying to make that the theme for the rest of the artwork for the album.
I like that. Yeah, I hope you guys continue on with that because I feel like I said it's a perfect fit for how you guys sound, and I think that those things should be, cohesive with the album cover and the music that's contained within.
Sure, and plus we really don't want to do what other metal bands do or heavy bands do, where it's just like black and the logo's in the center, and there's a mountain of fire and dragons and all this other crap. You really want to do something different.
Yep, I agree. That's the way to go, man. So, where can people follow you guys on social media and buy the record when it comes out, or before it comes out, pre-order?
Yeah, so we're on Bandcamp. So we sell the record ourselves at Bandcamp. It's carbomb.bandcamp.com. Overseas in Europe, we have a label called Holy Roar. They're doing distribution for us over there. And that's actually Justine from Employed to Serve's label.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, she runs that. She's awesome. So we're really happy that we're doing that. And as far as social media, we're on Instagram and Facebook. So I think it's /Carbomb on Facebook, and for Instagram, it's Carbomb Official.
Cool. Well, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to do the podcast, man. I really appreciate it.
Dude, no problem, man. I hope I see you at a show one day.
Be excellent to each other. And